Two Leafs prospects are absolutely lighting up their junior leagues, and one's point streak might be coming to an end. The Leafs goaltending situation has just become very interesting. Who would be your Game 1 starter with Matt Murray possibly returning to the Leafs lineup in April? All of that and more in this video. And guys, welcome back to Leafs Digest. My name is Darius Domingues, and we've noticed that about 80% of you are not actually subscribed to the channel. So if you want to do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything Toronto Maple Leafs, and hitting subscribe would really help Nick and I out on the road to the playoffs. We're on the road to 7K subscribers, and it's going to be very, very exciting with the playoffs right around the corner. There is less than 15 games left in the season, so this is when it gets interesting. We'll see what the Leafs do with their line combinations heading into the playoffs, and hopefully everyone is healthy heading into the playoffs. More on that in a second in terms of goaltending. But first, we'll start in the Ontario Hockey League with Easton Cowan and his point streak. And I mean, Easton Cowan, this is from Knights PR. He got an assist on Barkley's goal, his 35th, extends his point streak to 36 games. Cowan has passed Connor Bedard and Logan Stankoven for the third longest point streak in the CHL since the year 2000. Who are the other two names? We'll get to that in a second, but he is with some great company, and I mean, that is very impressive. And one thing about this entire point streak is that they're not garbage goals and garbage assists. He is like backhand saucing passes from the blue line to guys tape to tape, and they're tapping it in. Like, he is putting in some great work this season, and he has been we've talked about it a lot on the channel, he has been a very nice surprise for Leafs fans and for Leafs management, I'm sure too, because you know, they went out of their way to draft him with a draft pick that they acquired for Rasmus Sandin, or in return for Rasmus Sandin. And, you know, this was kind of an off-the-board pick at the time. And he's been one of the best players in the OHL this season, despite missing time for the World Juniors and stuff like that. So, obviously, the point streak has been very, very impressive. And, you know, he is up to 34 goals, 96 points on the season in 54 games this season in the OHL. There are 68 games, but like I mentioned, he did miss some time, and it was the final game of the regular season. So one thing I found interesting too heading into the playoffs is I'm not sure if the point streak technically continues. You might have to pick it up next year. But the one other interesting thing is, what if he makes the Leafs next year? This point streak could end at 36, and I'm not even sure if, you know, even if you were to go back to London next year, is it something where you can just pick up and the point streak continue? That would be interesting. I'm not sure where he stands with that. So the point streak, for all we know, could have come to an end, but, you know, not because he just didn't get a point. It's because the season ended, and he might make the NHL next year. So that'll be interesting to keep an eye on, and keep an eye on him in the playoffs too, because the playoffs, it gets a little bit tighter, the games. So will he continue to score at a point-a-game pace? We'll see. But London is poised to make a deep run, and I think that's very exciting for the Leafs prospect as well, because the OHL, in terms of junior leagues and the NCAA, is built a little bit closer to the NHL than the rest of the leagues, just because you have 4 sets of 7-game series as your playoffs. So it's more like the NHL, so that experience is going to really help them. And we'll see if London gets to the final again. They're a well-oiled machine, the London Knights are. So they're back on top of the OHL once again. They won the Hamilton Spectator Trophy for the best record in the league, and Easton Cowan was a big part of that this season. And if you look at the point streaks over the years, players with longer CHL point streaks than Easton Cowan since the year 2000, Alex Radulov and Sidney Crosby. That is the entire list. That is some impressive company for Easton Cowan. And if you take a look at his stats this year, like we just mentioned, only 54 games. So he didn't get into every game this year, but 34 goals, 62 assists, 96 points. He's putting in some work with the penalty minutes as well, so that's nice to see. But just an awesome season from Easton Cowan. It's great to see. And last year he had a pretty decent run in the playoffs. That's really where he came alive, and I think he caught the eye of Leaf scouts last year in the playoffs for the London Knights. So I'm excited to see what he does this time around, considering the regular season he just had. It's going to be very exciting to watch. And I know what you're thinking, right? We've always been talking about Easton Cowan. What's going on with some of the other prospects? We know what's going on with, like, Dennis Hildeby, for example. He's in Toronto Marlies. What's going on with Fraser Mitten? He's putting in some great work as well. Leafs prospect Fraser Mitten with a primary assist, giving Saskatoon a 2-0 lead. He is up to 47 points in 42 games this year. And I think he's going to be a really nice third line, potentially shutdown guy who can chip in for points. He's a big body, so I think it's going to be exciting for Leaf fans. There's another really good prospect there, and I think the prospect of Saskatoon going for their first ever championship this year, they kind of put all their eggs in one basket, especially with acquiring Mitten as well. It's going to be exciting to watch their playoff run as well if you're a Leafs fan, because that's another team with a Leafs prospect that is gunning for it, that's hoping they can make it to the Memorial Cup. And wouldn't that be something if in the 4 teams at the Memorial Cup, we see 2 Leafs prospects in Fraser Mitten and Easton Cowan playing each other? That would be pretty interesting, but we'll see how that plays out. That'll be fun to keep tabs on. But anyway, one thing that is very interesting that is coming to light recently is there's a potential goaltender controversy in Toronto, which I don't think anybody saw coming except for maybe earlier in the year. But there's something to be said about the way Joseph Woll's playing. Matt Murray's name is suddenly in the mix again. He's participating in skates and practices. And I thought this was very interesting, this little excerpt. With 16 games left on the schedule and a bunch of back-to-backs still remaining, do they give Woll more runway to get him back up to speed? I mean, we've been talking about it the last couple videos, and you can pause this and read it if you want, but, injuries could, come into the picture again. It's important to run all 3 goalies like the Leafs are doing with I wouldn't even call it a tandem. They're just running 3 goalies, which we've never seen. They flew Joseph Woll to Carolina the day before a game, even though they were playing that night. So it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of divvy up the starts heading down the stretch. But do they give Joseph Woll more starts over the other goaltenders just to see what he has heading into the playoffs? If you ask me, heading into the playoffs right now, it has to be Samsonov. He has the experience of winning a round for the Toronto Maple Leafs last year. And, if he is 100% healthy, not even 100%, if he's 90%, guys are banged up all the time. You have to play Samsonov in my eyes. I think he is the guy to go to. And again, barring any injuries, I think he's the guy you go to. But now there's another monkey wrench thrown into everything with Matt Murray possibly being medically cleared by early April, which is as soon as next week, meaning a return to game action is still possible for Matt Murray this season. And wouldn't that be interesting? Because I know Joseph Woll has had a great run this season so far. And I mean, we saw what he did in the playoffs. It wasn't his fault last year. He gave the Leafs a chance to win in that second round. But wouldn't that be interesting if Matt Murray comes back into the picture? I'm not saying he could be a starter, but if he is healthy and he gets some game action in, whether it be with the Marlies or maybe the Leafs, maybe he takes over the backup position. He has the experience of playing in the playoffs more so than Joseph Woll. Obviously, he has 2 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins, not bad. And he could come into that backup spot. He could never play. He could be in the backup spot and he could just never play throughout the playoffs. Who knows? It could be Samsonov's net. But I think that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on. That Joseph Woll could be the third man, and then Martin Jones could be the odd man out and heading back to the Marlies. I think that would be really interesting. For the time being, with Matt Murray out of the picture, I still think Martin Jones is the third guy. No disrespect, but I just think you have 2 better goaltenders there. Even though Martin Jones has put in some great work this season. But it's very interesting. I think, from Elliot Friedman, I think he could get cleared to play sometime in early April. I should say cleared sometime in early April. And then he would assume that he's going to end up with a conditioning stint on the Marlies because they're not going to throw him right into the NHL right away, which is completely understandable. But it's not out of the realm of possibility that he could play this year in the AHL at some point. And could he end up as the Leafs backup heading in the playoffs? Wouldn't that be interesting? And imagine if there are some injuries. I mean, I'm definitely not hoping, but anything can happen at this time of year. We saw it the other night. It looked like Samsonov was hurt. Thankfully, he wasn't, but things could happen at this time of year. So imagine if Matt Murray suddenly enters the picture again. Very interesting. Looks like the Leafs might have 4 goaltenders on their hands right now, which is definitely not a bad problem to have. But let me know what you think about Easton Cowan's run in the OHL and what he can do in the OHL playoffs. Fraser Mitten, wouldn't it be interesting if they played each other in the Memorial Cup this year? And let me know what you think of the Leafs goaltending situation. Who would you start in game 1 of the playoffs? Personally, it would still be Samsonov, barring everyone is healthy. But it could be interesting with Matt Murray kind of getting back up to NHL speed. And Nick and I will keep you updated, and we'll be back for another video tomorrow.